Hi and welcome to my video. If you have seen the intro of this video and your car is starting like this and you are searching for answers, that's what I would guess. And my car's running fine today. These videos I have in this video here, they were all done after I got my car, which was an eBay purchase, in November of 2020. And these are the first beginnings. And what you saw here with the starting were multiple problems the car actually had. And I will give you here a short rundown, and then I will add all the other videos which I have posted actually throughout time on my channel, but that is kind of summarized here basically as a kind of troubleshooting guide. For the repair videos, I got all these tutorials posted. So what you want to do is you want to click on my channel and then go to the video button, and then you get a list of all my videos, and then you also can look at my playlists, because I have grouped the particular videos together in playlists for like the fuel pump repair system or the whole fuel pump system repair, the other repair for the intake manifold with all the vacuum related hoses and issues that come with it is in one playlist. And then I have a few other ones in there as well on diagnostic and troubleshooting in general, electronic control units. But just to give you an idea, so this is basically how I got the car. The car came from California. It had sat there for quite a while, probably since 2014, 2015. That was about when the odometer went out, and I got that fixed. So the car actually arrived here with 330,403 miles on it. And that was one of the earlier things I fixed. This video you just saw was done, I think, a week or 2 weeks after I had gotten the car. And I had started to play around with the the mixture control screw on the flow unit, on the metering unit, or actually, I have never been able to really translate the German name for the thing. It is the air mixture unit, or the relationship between air to fuel ratio mixture. That is a mixer. That's what they call it, a mixer, air to fuel mixer, ratio mixer, air to fuel ratio mixer. That's how you would translate the German name for that whole unit, with the flow meter and the fuel distributor on top of it, or the fuel regulator. No, it's not a regulator. It is a fuel divider. It divides the incoming fuel equally to all 8 ports or 6 ports or whatever your engine may have. That is the continuous injection system from Bosch. So the divider unit basically is going to distribute an X amount of fuel equally to each cylinder, depending on how much vacuum is applied to the lower side of the plate, which then moves down and pushes the plunger up. That allows the fuel flow. That just sums it up in a nutshell. And the screw, the Allen screw, the 3mm Allen screw, which is the favorite thing to play around with for anyone who's trying to adjust anything, is the mixture control. It adjusts the mixture between air, depending on the position of the plate, on how far the plunger goes in. That gives you either more fuel or less fuel, depending on the plate position. And I had, of course, screwed around with it, and then the car won't start. But this was just one of the very few things. So this was just the beginning of troubleshooting the system. And the tutorial videos, like I said, is on my channel. They deal with all the individual components and how they're fixed or adjusted. And this video here is just going to show you of what issues I encountered when I took basically inventory over the next, I would say, 4 weeks or so, while I was working my way into the car, usually on the weekends for a few hours. So I got here probably November 12th it was. That video, I think, was done November 22nd, so about a week later, 10 days later. Yeah, it was a week and a half later, that Saturday. And, you know, it was the first beginnings, and then I started to opening everything up and checking this, that, and the other thing. To sum this whole thing up, if you have bought a Mercedes Benz, a 560 or 420, that's the two versions I really cover. The issues for other models and model years are going to be similar. As long as you have a CSI system in there, the Bosch continuous injection system, you're going to encounter very similar issues and reasons why these parts go the way they do go. But in this video you just saw with the starting, the reason why I had to start the car even when the mixture, the Allen screw was adjusted correctly 3 times, was because of the failing or worn out voltage regulator of the alternator. When they start and they get excited the first time, they cause an interference in the fuel pump, fuel pump relay, and in the idle speed control unit. And the computers on both of them are resetting, and that aborts the entire process. And that comes because of the pulling of probably of sparks, you know, on the brushes to the anchor, and that causes the interference. So this was one thing I had to fix too. So if you have a problem with a car, which starts where you have to do it 2 or 3 times to go with the key, and then it starts like at the 3rd time, then the reason is, even if you crank for 5 or 10 seconds the first time, and it always starts at the 3rd time or so, that's related directly to the voltage regulator on the alternator when the brushes are worn. As soon as I put a new one in, that completely disappeared. From that point on forward, it was just whether or not the plate was correctly adjusted with the Allen screw for the correct plate clearance, plate height, and you know, the play if needed. Some models, and I'll get to this in a second, they need more play, others need less play. It depends on how worn out the system is. And in these cars, the first question, if you have never bought one of these cars and you're thinking about buying one, is they're going to fall into 2 categories, basically. If you have like a barn find who has not run at all, then I probably would do all of the work in the tutorials, fuel pump system, rebuilding the fuel distributor itself, and all the vacuum related hoses and everything else what comes with it, and flushing out the fuel lines and everything else. This system was designed before ethanol gasoline was available. And a lot of these clearances are so small that any type of ethanol fuel, 10% or 5%, will leave a residue inside the fuel system that goes from the fuel injectors over the fuel distributor, including these ultra-fine wire mesh filters they have in there. And if there's even the minutest air leak in there, the ethanol, the alcohol basically is going to evaporate out of it before anything else. And in the evaporation process, it leaves a resin in there, which clogs up everything. And the only way you can dissolve this resin is with either an acid, in this case And Bosch uses the citric acid in a 10% or so, 15% concentration in dissolved in ionized water and or distilled water with no impurities. Or you could use like another chemical, tool is probably one of them you can use to dissolve ethanol residue. You have this basically on any vehicle which was built before 2000. They're very difficult with ethanol fuel in general, no matter where this car is coming from or which manufacturer it is. It is just a fact of this. The fuel today also has different additives than what we had in the 1980s or 1990s, for enhancements and wear protection and this, that, and the other thing, temperature stability, God knows what they're putting in there. And a lot of this old gasket material which they're using in there, whether it's O-rings, rubber type, type of gaskets, they will deteriorate from these additives or even from the ethanol because they were not designed for this. This is a given. So if you have an old car and that was a barn find and they had ethanol in there at one point or another, then you will be looking at rebuilding and cleaning everything from the lines to the tank to the pumps, or basically replacing everything, including the fuel distributor. In my case, the car was sold as a running car with starting problems. The seller had said that it takes 3 times to start the car. They had the Allen screw adjusted fairly okay, but the car had a high idle at about 1100. And the power steering pump was not working. And that was what I got basically. So that was sort of my starting point. And this video and what I have here, what is going to follow, will lead you and show you through the initial inspection in fairly great detail of what I had actually received of my eBay purchase there. I paid $750 for the car, and then I paid, that was the sales price, and I paid, I think, $1,100 or something like this to have the car shipped from San Diego to Kansas City. And that took about 3 or 4 days. So the entire cost for me to get the vehicle here was less than $2,000. It was around $1,800 or $1,900. And because the car was running, I knew that that would be, workable, more workable. I knew that the engine would crank over and all of this stuff. And in this condition, it was now the question is, when was the last time that the parts were actually replaced at 300,000 or 330,000 miles? You don't run a car that long without having constant repairs and maintenance done. So I found out that the fuel distributor had been replaced somewhere around 2006. So that was already on its last leg because they last about 15 years. Secondly, the car was parked more or less outside in California, Southern California, under a tarp from the previous owner, not the guy who sold it on eBay, but the person who donated the car to a non-profit, which then auctioned the car off, which that guy I bought it from bought it. And so he drove it a little while, but he was in over his head with this whole thing. So the car was in a position where the previous owner really didn't want to put any more money in there from what they had already put in. And that owner had bought that car in 2008 with about 260 or 270,000 miles on it. So they drove the car from 2008 till 2014, about 60, what would that be, 270, 50,000 miles or so, and then they fixed this and they fixed that, and they put a whole bunch of Fabi parts and aftermarket parts in there, no-name parts, and all sorts of stuff. What I found out there, what I dissected, I had a EZL unit in there from a 420 SEL, which has the wrong idle speed advance timing on there. So I had to get that new. The what do you call it now on the EHA valve was going bad. That has an internal gasket and two O-rings. When the O-rings go bad, it leaks out. If the internal gasket goes bad, then the EHA valve doesn't properly regulate anymore the fuel flow going through it, regardless of how much current you're pumping through there. So the EHA valve was going out. So those two items I had to replace. They had the wrong spark plug wires on there. And all of the stuff I'm pointing out, you will see in the video, which is to come. The chain was replaced, and in my videos here, you will see this. The chain was good in early December of 2020. However, I then fixed everything, and I left those parts until they failed. That was the fuel pump system in the rear. That went out in May of 2021 with the hose cracking, the high pressure hose on the pump output. And that was about the only thing. Then I rebuilt the whole thing. Those videos are as playlist available. And then came with the heat. That was really the thing, is when we got the Kansas summer and I was driving the car on a daily basis. That's when all the other parts I hadn't fixed in the earlier videos really started to come unglued. It was the fuel pump system, and the fuel distributor had gone out, started to leak, probably about, I would say, 3 days, 4 days after I had repaired my intake manifold system. And so you can see this. So when these parts are old, you start repairing one thing, is then you have really no clue on when the other parts, which are still good at the point of the repair, and for how long they're gonna last. Well, anyway, this is all documented, and the chain lasted until June of 2021. So I was able to drive like a total of 2,000 miles. And then actually the Fabi chain tensioner they had put in there started to fail. And I have added that video here to the very end of this video, where I inspect and I take the Fabi chain tensioner apart. And I point out the parts which actually failed in it. And that is all heat and age related. Again, there's a gasket in there on that plunger, and that gasket got hard, or that O-ring got hard, and it no longer sealed and built up enough pressure, and that stretches the chain basically. That's kind of the sequence in this. And interestingly enough, with all the old cars, most of these issues starting to come out when we go here from winter into spring, and then especially from the later spring then into summer when it gets really hot. That's when most of the failures occur, or when it starts to come unglued. I have driven now over 6,000 miles with this car. I have not broken down once. I didn't have to call a tow truck or anything, because I went along and I did a lot of preventive stuff already. I changed it, but on some items I just waited to see for how long would they actually last. So I can tell you with great certainty that basically every part will have to be replaced at one point. And I got a good idea now on how long they last. And it really, really depends too whether the car was garaged all the time, like in darkness and air conditioned. Then the O-rings and everything else, gaskets, etc., and rubber parts, they age very slowly. If the car is parked outside and it is exposed to UV light and heat, then these rubber O-ring gasket parts, they deteriorate quickly. And everything that has a O-ring rubber part or a gasket in it will basically die out on you. And that is true for the steering damper. It is the shocks. It is basically any part that moves and has any type of pressure in it. and any type of gasket seal or rubber or O-rings, basically. They go out, that's just it, and then you have to repair it. So if you have a car like this and you are thinking about buying it, you basically can plan on rebuilding the car about every 15 years. If the car is garaged, you might be lucky if these parts last 20 years. So every 20 years, you have to probably cough up anywhere around between 5 to 20 grand. Depends on how many accessories the car has, you know, with the additional items in there. And it depends on how thoroughly and with what type of parts you want to fix the car up. You don't have to, but then you're going to get this ongoing project vehicle where you're constantly working on something and fixing it. And I think I have pretty much shared everything here for the moment, is because I said in my other video, my other post, that I don't have any other videos at this point, which is true, because I have fixed everything related to driving, which could break down. I have to do some transmission work. I have to check out my valve body in there and see, you know, there's probably one or two, you know, parts which may not work 100% right anymore after all this time. But I have to get a lift to do this. So when we do the transmission thing one of those days, we will put it, I will put a video up for this. Otherwise, I'm probably gonna do steering and suspension related stuff sometimes next year. The previous owner who drove the car until 2018 or 20, when did they donated the car? 2020. Yeah, 2020 they donated the car. And it sat for quite a while. They must have around 2012, 2014, did some work to the suspension and steering. Like I had the tire rod ends were no-name brand type of Chinese-made ones, and I replaced them with quality parts and that sort of stuff. But at this time, all of the rubber-related part in the steering system, which were replaced at that time, are still okay. So my guesstimate would be that will be coming next year, that I may have to start taking a look at this, or maybe the year after next. Depends on how the steering and suspension is going to perform. Otherwise, with the engine, looking at the mileage, I probably can drive another, I would say, 20,000 miles or so, maybe 30,000 miles, and then we probably have to redo the heads. You know, then it's just the wear and tear, age, mileage, and everything else what comes with it. The heads were redone by Mercedes Benz, I think in 2002, 2006, somewhere in that range. And so they're gonna have now 100,000, 120,000 miles on it as it is. That explains the slight rough vibration I have in there, the little bit of vibration. It is just the wear and tear. So, but at this point, there's nothing, since I changed now the timing chain and the tensioner over to Mercedes-Benz parts. From that point, I won't have any issues that is gonna jump teeth or anything like this. Well, I hope you will enjoy these videos which are following here. And I would be happy if you were to subscribe and like the video. Then you can be updated. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them below in the comment section. I will see that I can answer them for you, or refer you, to the proper, or give you the proper direction for it, whatever the question or answer may be. And with that, enjoy your video. And we will see. See? So, it did not fix the issue. Yeah. So this is pointing now. So today we're going to start out with the test for the spark plug, the ignition. We got about 650 right now. The engine is warm at operating temperature. And I got the good old oscilloscope set up out here. And here you can see it. This is what it looks like coming out of the ignition coil. And then we can take a look at this here. And it will tell us that this, if we can get it here, it's a fault image. This is basically what we got, and it says ignition voltage, too low, combustion duration longer, test requirement may occur at any speed, cause spark plug, electrode gap too small, fuel air mixture too rich, loss of compression. And that's what we got here, is because I have still not fixed all of my hoses. But we're running. I had to get a hand pack probe because you can't get any more Bosch probes. So once we get, this hose has been replaced now. This hose over here has been replaced. You see how nice this is. And well, these ones here, these rails, this is, I can hear it here leak. Here it leaks and here it leaks. So once we get those fixed, then we can get something going. All right, folks, so there we go. Now we got it. We got to open up at nothing but surprises. So our chain wheel is next to nothing. It looks like a new chain, and you can see the colors have hardly changed. That is still white. It looks whiter here. However, I was able to pull out the oiler tubes, and it actually broke off in here, so I gotta fiddle fuck this thing out. That's the first thing. It looks actually pretty good. And so what they did is they changed the, you can see how hot this is here. That goes to my, you pull this off here. Those things are completely worn out, this stuff. I have those, they sent only one and they forgot to send the end caps. That's a Mercedes Benz dealership. So I got it only for one side. Anyway, what they did is they changed the timing chain. I do not know when, but here you can see it. It got now the still white color. It is not fully wet yet. And there's virtually no slack in it. And I haven't cranked it over into position yet. I will do that here next when I get in there. But now we're starting to look at this here. And you can see here, I have virtually no slack on this. But then again, this tube here on this side came off a lot easier. Let me turn that light around here. See, this just came out. And interestingly enough, these tubes, they come out from the rear faster than they come out from the front, for whatever reason. So that was the thing. So the chain is good, full tension there. It's minimal. New guides, or at least I would say they may change that at 300,000 miles. That could be quite possible, but the tubes were not changed, these plastic parts. And then so they went through all of this stuff. They changed the chain, they do this, they do the other thing. They don't fix the ICV, the idle speed valve. And then comes the best part. Instead of buying a new spark plug set, what they did is they got a cheap-ass 6-cylinder set, probably at Walmart. See this? So I got cylinders 1 to 6. Got the new ones, these cheap ones. And 7 and 8. Got the old original 300,000 mile spark plugs. That's why that engine is ruddling, because the resistance between the two plugs is different. Besides of these ones here being worn out after all these miles. So what I'm going to do is just, the distributor and rotor are okay. I have another rotor coming. The cap is good. There's no minimal wear in there. But this is what these people did. So I don't know how you can go through all of this thing, changing your timing chain, the guide rails, and all of this stuff, which is major, major work. And then you wind up putting a $29.95 set for 6-cylinder car spark plug wire set on this engine. And we used the old ones, and you can see this, these ones are old. I mean, this is the original style. This came with the car when it was built in '89. So these are the surprises we're finding. Otherwise, today was a pretty productive day. I got my fuel pump situated. I got the new accumulator in there, and I got the new fuel filter and the new check valves. The pumps are still okay. They're starting to make noise, but I'm not going to change them now immediately, as I wanted to first see, because these are the surprises I'm finding. But this is good, so I don't have to do the timing chain now, at least not for another 50,000 miles or so. I have to double check my timing that they actually put it back together the right way. The wear on the camshafts looks good. The oilers obviously have been holding up for all of this time. And the interesting thing was when I pressurized the system after I put the new filter and the accumulator and the two check valves in there, which were leaking, by the way. And the accumulator is the original one. This is the original accumulator which was in there. And that thing is, I would say, probably 32 years old. That's what came with the car. You can see it. So I took this out. These are the check valves which were in there. They're leaky. They will not hold pressure anymore. They were done basically. This was the adapter which came off the filter. And like I said, I have to filter outside because it is smelling like gasoline and I didn't want this in the shop. See, this is already my new hose here for the fuel injection system for the air. And that's going to go in there pretty soon. But anyway, when I jumpered 7 and 8 on the relay back there, the pumps would draw first when there was very little resistance, about 5 amps, and then they went up to 9 amps, 9.5. So electrically they're working. I got full pressure. And once the system pressurized, you could hear it squealing. The new accumulator was getting under pressure under that 6 bar, which is around 80 PSI, somewhere around there. And, you know, that was quite interesting to hear this all come to life. And you could hear the CIS making noises, you know, from all of the strain, suddenly getting the full pressure back into the system. And now, of course, we're running completely rich because I got the pressure back up. I have to check this. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take out the spark plugs and take a look at this. And that's where I may quit for today because I kind of had enough. And then tomorrow I'm going to put the covers back on. I wish I had these hoses here right now is to put them on, because that's where the air leaks, the vacuum leaks go. You can see this now better. This hose goes here to this hose here, which goes underneath the CIS, comes out here, and then it feeds into this junction where it goes then in through the idle speed control valve, and then it goes back into your intake manifold and your actual acceleration, your throttle body, that whole thing here, that goes then in there. But if this stuff is leaking, it's starting to bypass air here and there and over here and over there. Now the other thing is what I'm going to check is on the CIS is there's a filter in here and there's a little strain filter in here. So I have to take those out, these filters. This is a filter here and this is a filter, that inner nut. And what I mean by the play is, you see this, there's no play. What you want is that this has a little bit of play in it. So when you crank, you're going to get the vacuum, and that little play will help you to accelerate this plate, and then it will open up your fuel, and then you get actually fuel. You can see this there. There's that resistance, and then it comes back up. And that's how this is supposed to work. And this needs to have a little bit of play. But this is the last thing we can adjust after all the other things are fixed. But like I said, we're looking here pretty good on the camshafts. That is mostly just dirt. It's just a little bit rusty. I guess it sat for a while. There's no scorings in there. You cannot see any particular scorings. What you see, what that is rust. It is dirt, really. That's what that is. Otherwise, it looks fine. So I will keep you posted, guys. All right, have a great weekend, and thank you, Mercedes Source Kent, for getting us the tips on the oilers for the stuff. I got the fender cover here, and I thank you to Kaya and to Kent. up in Washington State for sending the parts down here. I wish you all a good weekend. Thank you. Okay, so here comes now the timing. We got the timing all set up, and we can see this here nicely. The rotor is now aligned exactly with the distributor mark, and we're almost exactly at this position here for cylinders 1 through 4 on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side we are just a tad bit off. You can see this, just a little tiny bit off on this side. And I will see what I'm going to do there, if I'm going to leave it like this or if I can adjust this a little bit. Like I said, this chain has virtually no slack in it whatsoever. And here comes the next thing, the covers. We can see this here. That is the right side cover. There is no marks whatsoever in it. It's dirty, carbon deposit, but no chain wear whatsoever. We have no damage in these covers, nothing. We just have to clean them up. And that's what I'm going to do. You can see it just sat for a very long time, and I got all that black deposit stuff in there. And of course, the old gaskets are hard. I mean, you can see this, hard as anything. Yeah, and of course they were leaking. Just to show you the new gaskets, this is how soft they are. So this gives you an idea where this is at. And now comes the best part, compression check. 140 PSI, cylinder 1, 141, 145, 145, 150. 150, 152, 145, 145. All around 10 bars. I did cylinder 1 a second time after I did 8. And then I came up to 160 actually. And but they're exactly in the position they need to be in. And these are the spark plugs I found. I have never heard of this brand. Autolite, number 64. And that's what I have in there. So you can see this, they're all black. And I'm not quite sure if they were set to the correct gap. But with this ignition system, what I got there, I have to also check the ignition coil to see if I have even gotten the right ignition coil in there. But the engine is a winner with the chain and the way everything looks like it, the cams, valves, overhead, compression, everything checks out. So we did good on this car for $750. The issues are only rubber related, air hoses, leaks, that sort of stuff, seals. Everything else is fine. I'm going to have to put some lubricant in here too to get this. You can see this, how kind of a little bit rusty and sticky this is. So I'm just going to spray some of that WD-40 where I got that foam stuff in there. And that will hold it. Then that's going to come tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to put this together. And then the next job will be, when the parts come in finally, is to replace this hose underneath here, this hose, I believe, and then the hoses here for the air system, and then the big boot underneath the CIS. So everything right now related with the rough running and starting and everything is all vacuum related and fuel related and ignition related. And so far that we got the wrong ignition wires with the wrong resistance on there. So once we get that resolved, we should have pretty much a running car. And then I just have to work through all the electrical issues I got, you know, here and there, bad contacts and what have you, and we can get this thing going. So that was the last update for today. Tomorrow when we put it back together, I'm probably going to do another update. Bis dann. Okay. Good morning. So this is our first video for today. We got the Unit's all cleaned up and pretty gunk free. This is as good as it's going to get with gasoline. You can see it now. We want to adjust our throttle position sensor switch, and the manual wants it to be off at 0.2 millimeters, which I got here. Let me just see. This is all very tricky with one hand. This is really a job where you need someone. So you can see it, I squeeze it. Nothing at 0.2. And here we got 0.17, so 0.3 of a, oops. This was not meant to be iPhones for this kind of stuff, or phones. You can see this, how difficult that is. My God, I keep saying this. I'm making this for you because because these videos are not out there. These people write a whole bunch of stuff on their message boards and this, but the crucial information is not there. It got to be 0.2. If I can get it in here. Well, I guess you get the idea. If I get this. My God. Let me see if I can do it better with the right hand and videotape with the left hand. Let's see. We get this in here. No. I have to bring this up. This is 0.17. It works fine with two hands. There you go. 0.178 it goes. And 0.12 or 0.2 millimeters it doesn't. It's about 8 mil for Americans. This is 8 mil. That seems to be working better. And there's nothing. So that's correctly adjusted. This is what they want to know. You can do it here in the end stop because 0.2 millimeters will about translate to 0.2 millimeters here on the opening. That's what they're looking for. And now comes the question, should we take out the EGR valve and assemble it here? Or should we bring that unit in by itself and then hook up the top part to it? And I think that is too tricky. And I'm going to take the AGR valve out, not the AGR valve, the EGR pipe, and I will hook it up here, and I'm going to reconnect the brake part to this too, and screw this already in. So I'm going to pre-assemble this thing here on the bench as far as I can, and then I move it in there, okay? That will be then the next video. All right, so it's about lunchtime, and we got all back in here. What's missing now is just the idle control valve and the fuel distributor. The fuel distribution, this distributor for the sparking, and that's gonna be it, and then we can fire up. But let's see what you guys think of this. The original Mercedes Benz. The video made in Germany, gray market, and from our friends in China. Now let's see if we can do this. I guess you get the idea. Oops, now we gotta tear it. Let's see. It shut itself off. In ounces, 11.8. 11.6. 11.6. $600, list price $750. On eBay for $230 or $250. On eBay for $30 or $35 with free shipping. I will let you know on how they work out. All right? Thanks. Okay, let's see what we got. There you go. And that's what this is supposed to look like. And you can see where my economy gauge is. And look how smooth she's running. That's it, folks. Good afternoon. So today I'm doing the overhaul of the fuel assembly in the back with all the hoses. And no surprises here. I'm going to start here on the left. This is the fuel supply. And as you can see, I can see it too well. The date on this, we zoom in, is first week of 1989. So this is actually, or was, the original fuel feeding line, which goes to, let's see, this part here. So this attaches here, this goes on the pump here, and it goes to the backside of the accumulator, clamps on there. That sits in the fuel strainer, which I got out, and you can see this. It's pretty dirty. Original part number, you can see, and how the gasket is squeezed down. So you can make the assumption that this part has been in there probably since day one. So you're looking at a 32-year-old fuel strainer, and it doesn't actually look too bad for that age. This is the new one here, same thing. And in order to get this thing out, I got a very large tool. I got a 46mm socket, which I cut off because there is so little room back there. See this? I cut this down. I put this on the big socket here on the 3/4 inch wrench, and that loosened it up by a 1/4 turn because that gasket was so tight on the tank that you couldn't get it out any other way. About a 1/4 turn. And then when I got it loose, I put this thing in here, and I used the 19mm wrench to turn it completely loose. You have to remove all the hoses first. This is the return line, which goes back into the tank coming from the front, from the fuel distribution system. This is the new one here. And this is the high pressure going to the front, the high pressure hose. And on mine, that blew up about 4 weeks ago. And I drove with this fix here. There were 2 clamps on here, 300 miles, and it broke right here where this plastic was. So I just put this coupling in here and fixed it because I was waiting for parts. And I got this part here, which you can see came in from Mercedes Benz, brand spanking new. This was made on, let's see if I can read it, January 29th, 21, just a few months ago. This is this part here, which goes from here to here. Then we have this hose here is, where did I put it? Oh, that's still in the bag over here. That is this one here. This is the small one from the tank to the rear side of the fuel accumulator. The fuel accumulator is new. I bought that in January, so is the fuel filter. But I got a new fuel filter just in case, because I did not know whether or not the fuel strainer was still good. These are the 2 new Bosch Mercedes Benz pumps. Plenty of Mercedes Benz clamps. I got all of the stuff again from Mercedes Benz. I bought extra O-rings because one day you won't be able to get them, and I got an extra fuel strainer. Make sure that you fit your new fuel strainer, that this matches with this hose end, because there's 2 different sizes available, and I think the first generation 126 used a smaller one, and that this hole would be smaller. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pumps out, and the parts we were waiting for came in from Germany, and they don't have any more of those here. These are these plastic holders which go around the pumps to seat them properly in this here, and you can see how bad they are here, so they're going to be replaced. And what happened was we had to order them. They had to come in from Germany, and the date they were made was on June 21st, 2004. And if I understood them correctly, those were the last 3 they had in Stuttgart. That was it. I don't know if they're going to make any more of them. I got an extra one now. Bosch or Mercedes Benz does not sell this with the pumps when you order the replacement pumps. They do not come with these plastic holders. That's why we had them. So they sent us first the wrong ones, I think for W201. So we sent them back, and then they finally got here. That's why that took 4 weeks for me to get to this here to repair this. Otherwise, I would have done this earlier. And now let me see if I can get underneath here and show you this, what this actually looks like. So, just to get an orientation, this is your rear drive shaft, passenger side, and here is the big hole for the fuel strainer, and here is the one for the fuel return line. Both lines are here to the side. You can see this high pressure side here, and the low pressure side is this here, where the hose just goes over it. And that boot just flips in there, back in there. The boot is still good, I got. So that is not a problem, but you can see the big problem is the confined space between here to the top of the drive shaft. And that's why you have to cut that big 46 millimeter nut down, or driver, to get actually over the fuel strainer. The hoses came out with no problems. This one here has a lock ring on it, which makes it a little bit difficult. So I'm going to reassemble this. I start here, get everything reconnected and resituated here. Then I'm going to take lunch, and then I'm going to rebuild the pump assembly, and then it goes back in and we're done for today. Thank you. I will send the other video once I have the pump assembly rebuilt and show you this, what this looks like then prior to assembly. Thank you. So good afternoon. I pulled out my failing timing chain tensioner, and you can read this right here what it is. VB, made in Germany, $50, and it is garbage. And here is the new one, Mercedes Benz original. There you go with the box, made on January 1st 2020. So that was a year ago, over a year and a half ago. We're gonna put her in. I'm gonna take a look inside the hole to see if it did any damage, and that's it. So this is what happens. You can see here there's a hole blowing in there where there shouldn't be a hole in there, right there. It blew through it, and that is the oil pressure which builds up internally because that thing lives of oil. And this is what this looks like it here when you have it from Mercedes Benz. The hole is in the correct spot. So this is how poor this Fabi stuff is for $50 versus the Mercedes Benz one. That's the bleed hole. The oil enters here into this through the gasket. You can see this, the gasket goes on like this. And you can see this, the oil enters here, goes then into this hole, and it comes out of this one here too. And if we check this here, you can see this. The compression is, it's uniform. And here the compression goes stronger as deeper you go in, as harder it pushes. Alright, that's the update on it. Let me just show you. It sits right here. I'm going to peel the old gasket off, and we're going to feel in there and see if our guide rail is good, which it is. Yep, hard to see whether it is. So we're all good here. that was the update for today with the timing chain tensioner. Have a great evening. So good afternoon. This is now the conclusion of the timing chain tensioner. And we got them all in there. And I did the bolt thing, and I'm going to cut the heads off. And I'm going to use them as studs. Well, the engine is hot right now. And here. So you can see it. Right there. No leaks. That's the Mercedes Benz part. You can see the engine. I have the car in gear right now in D. Air conditioning running. And this is how we're idling. We're right around 500, 550 in this because that meter is a little bit slow. And you can see it, the fan is on, AC is off right now. But it kicks in and out. The temperature now is right at 100 degrees since we cleaned everything out. And the speedometer shows us 650, 600, so we're right there where we're supposed to be. And you can see the economy gauge, even with the air conditioner on, and that low RPM is all the way back to normal. That's basically it. So the timing chain, now we're going to take a look, timing chain guides, and the clearances on all of this stuff. This is the normal operating here to about 110, between 80 to 110. They have a version with 2 electric fans for hot countries. This car doesn't have it, so you have some more fluctuation in it. And let me just show you now in the back the parts. So besides of having 2 gaskets in there, this here and the second gasket, I got the second gasket off with MEK. It came off real easy. I didn't even have to scrape it. And the person who put this together, these 2 bolts are 5/16-20. And they actually need to be M8- or by 1.25. Normally 30 millimeter length, and I put 50 millimeter in there because it was easier to get the tensioner straight in there with the gasket aligned. And I used red thread lock to lock them in. Like I said, is I'm going to cut the heads off, and then I can just turn the nuts out and slide the whole thing out. That basically concludes the repair of the chain tensioner. Okay, you have a great afternoon. Good afternoon. I thought I'm going to make a fairly short video of what I found inside the Fabi chain tensioner. And the first thing, of course, what comes to mind is this seal where the front ball sits in. You can see it. This seal is hard as anything. So that means that this has been in the car for quite some time. The next item is the spring, and you can see the spring is no longer straight. It has a kink in it right here. And then the other thing is, I don't know if that is supposed to be that way or not, but on the Mercedes Benz drawing, these are straight cut. They don't have a angled cut like this here. You can see this on both sides. That is that pin which sits inside the spring. And then the other thing is the discoloration of the tip which pushes against the rail. You can see on how hard this was actually hit. Let me see if we can zoom in. Yeah, you can see the score marks and everything else. There's also an indication in here. Let me see if we can get enough light in there, and you can see this, that there's dirt on the inside, and that means that this plunger did no longer fully extend out. And that was basically the failure, somewhere between these parts. And I would say that this probably has quite a few miles on it. You can see the ball here and the other ball here. They got 3 springs where this one is bent, and see, that no longer went straight in there. Well, anyway, just for what it is worth, I would say this was probably replaced at the same time the timing chain was replaced, but unfortunately, Fabi does not add any dates on their parts, so it is very difficult to date this on when this was manufactured. I tried to scrape it off, but you can see from the dirt on here is that the unit itself has been in the car for quite some time. So I would guess the spring is part of it, and the failure started with the seal, that rubber O-ring in here, which no longer sealed the inside here to this exit hole where this bleed screw sits in with this pressure release system between these two springs. That's how it lost the oil pressure to retain oil pressure in here. And then the spring weakened out because it is bent, it is stressed, and that no longer pushed this all the way out against the rail. So hence this ping noise when you first started. Then the oil pressure comes in and it pushes the rail suddenly out, and that would also coincide with these score marks we have on there. Just food for thought. You have a great afternoon. Good afternoon. So today what we're going to do is we're going to check the slack on the chain, and we're going to do an offset key on the left-hand camshaft by 3 degrees. That's kind of what we figured. And just to give you an update, I got the car at 330,403. So we got right about 1,500 miles since I fixed the speedometer in December, and I first checked the tension on the timing chain for stretch. And back then we had virtually no stretch. So we got 1,500 miles. We drove in minus 10 degree Fahrenheit or minus 25 degree weather with it, and we lost the Fabi chain tensioner in the process of it. Let me show you what we got now. So the first thing is we got the new tensioner in there, and I don't know if I can zoom in. You can't see this really. I went in with the bore scope, and I will do an update on this later with what this actually looks like it, but the thing is exactly on the pin is exactly in the position where it needs to be. And we have now chain slack. You can see it much more than what we had before. So the chain got stretched in the cold weather. You can see this now. It's not really a lot. I secured this already on there. And I got the timing mark down here. Let me see if we can see this. Where are you, timing mark? Let me see. Here we got the flashlight handy. Yeah. So good afternoon. I bought this car, or I got the car with 330,403 miles on it. 330,403 miles. And if you remember this in the very beginning, I checked the oil rails on top there, the oil tube assemblies, and we checked the timing chain, and we had good tension on it. But I said in that video, which was about 6-7 months ago, that we're probably gonna have to replace this. And that chain, as I had suspected, was put in at 240,000, 250,000 miles. And I just got done putting a new chain in because the slack. So the chain did not survive the winter, and it had only 1,500 miles in it. Now we have the new chain in it, and you can see there's only minimal slack in it. And we got everything set up here. Let me just show you. We got the thing right down there at 0. And we got the distributed 0. Now, I wanted to show you something about the distributor. the distributor has an advance. And that advance has these flywheels here, these weights which fly out. You can see it pushes itself forward, it rotates clockwise, and it will advance this. And when I got this, this was stuck, and I had soaked that in WD-40 and then flushed it out, and now you can see it. The spring is probably still good, but what happened was when you service this here and this is stuck, it has to be the mark, if you can see this, both marks have to be here when you basically push it back. And what happened was the distributor was stuck here. So I had to take the distributor housing out and then rotate everything back in. So in the end position, you can see this down here. There is this little end thing here. Let me see. We can see this. Let me get this out of the way. This is difficult to see. This here, this part here is the end stop. And this has to be right here. And when this is at the end stop, this is for your idle. That's why you're getting a rough idle. Or that can be a good thing. That's in. Now it's in. See this? Now we're at the end stop. And we're right there at the mark. And here I got this exactly aligned on the left cam. And on the right cam, we got a slight offset. And, you know, I mean, this thing is not fully charged yet because of the oil. But this is basically it. And I did what they suggested. I took out the rocker arms. So you can see this here. There's no rocker arms in it. And I'm going to show you this in a second. And that way, I was able to actually pull the chain in without worrying about this thing here at all, because you can then just simply rotate the shaft and to set this back to alignment. You get the one over there aligned, the distributor aligned, and your zero mark aligned, and then you can freewheel this here, and you don't have to worry about bumping into the pistons when this backfires. So I have only now two things left. I'm going to reinsert the rocker arms, then rotate the engine 3 or 4 times over to make sure that everything is in place, and then we close it all off, and we're ready to go. And I'm going to make another video, theoretical video a little bit, because I went into my guide rails and into this whole thing here, into the abyss, as we call it, with the bore scope, and I can show you what we have there and how perfectly the new chain tensioner, you can see this, I cut the bolt off so I can just use this as a stud, and that is so much easier to get this in and out. And if we can see this, not quite, but we're sitting exactly against the pin where we need to sit at. And so that is perfectly aligned. The tensioner rail, that backside, does not have any scoring. And I'm going to show this tonight in the theoretical video with the pictures I got taken of this. And well, that's about it for the moment here. I will give you an update on how it is running later on. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. I thought I'm going to make another video because a viewer had pointed this out, that my temperature was getting too high. And that is true, but then it's not true. But I will show you this in another video later tonight, one of the theoretical ones, which goes back to the actual manual. This thing here was in my car, and it was already on its last. Like you can see, I have disconnected the wires here. What happened is, for whatever reason, this fan sits in there like this. Yep. And it should rotate in this direction, blowing down, and it didn't, because the wires which lead to my connection down here were reversed, or are reversed for whatever reason. I have to look into this. Anyway, it was sucking the air back, and that's why my AC was cycling like crazy, and that's why the temperature went up. And by the way, I found on the old chain, which is now in the dumpster in the metal recycle bin, it fell all the way in there. It said Fabi on there. So that was a Fabi chain and a Fabi tensioner. And I probably have Fabi rails and chain tensioner, chain guide tensioner in there as well. They're going to come out here pretty soon. But let me show you what I did. I had to replace this here because this thing was squealing and it just doesn't run easy anymore. And I got a new one. So what I did was I looked through the manuals, and I know that Mercedes Benz had a version for hot countries, and they had a special version for the 300 horsepower unit, and the that's nice. The cowl is still missing. That's coming. But we will get it here pretty soon. The engine runs pretty quiet now until we get the timing fully adjusted. You can see that there's not much of a shake in there. But what you can see, it's hardly noticeable. It's a slight vibration. And my compressor is now running constantly, so it no longer cycles. And this is now at the lowest stage. And they use those on the special purpose Mercedes Benz, the estate cars with the 300 horsepower engine. That's what that was used for. I got this for 75 bucks. Let me go inside. Yeah. Now, first of all, it's freezing cold in here. You can see this, my oil pressure is higher. And now the temperature, even though we got the temperature gauge says 109, it's more like 95 outside, and that is probably about 35 degrees Celsius, 30 to 35 C. So it is pretty hot here, and but now the car runs cool. The AC is blowing freezing cold, and it feels good because it no longer cycles. That has really stabilized the whole thing. But the problem primarily was with the swapped wires, that the fans were going in the opposite direction. And that was true when I hooked up the dual fan system. I had to swap the two wires around. There's a brown wire, which is ground, and a white wire. It has a white line, black basic color. And that is actually your plus. That is the switched one, which toggles between resistor off or off resistor and full 12 volts or 14 volts. And those two are swapped for whatever reason. Back in the very beginning, I had showed you this. The fellow who owned the car before, or someone else, had added an extra resistor and had bypassed the entire AC system because they couldn't get this thing to work. And they had wired in that, and they may have swapped that in the fuse box, where now my brown wire has actually plus 12 volts, and the brown and black wire is now the switched one. They must have changed those, but I got that back, but it is swapped, I guess. But that fixed the issue. The car doesn't get hot anymore, and you can see there's minimal vibration in there, so we're on the right track. I still have the 1030 in here, and you can see this when the engine runs colder. I get a much higher oil pressure. My oil pressure would drop down to 1 bar when the temperature goes up. Well, let me explain this real quick. In the operator's manual, it will tell you this, that in the heat gauge here, you have the red mark, and this comes from the mixture. This is your boiling point for the antifreeze, and they use a 44% mixture, which has a boiling point of 120 degrees Celsius. I have 50%, 50-50. My boiling point is 128 degrees Celsius. And they said this would be normal in stop and go or in heavy traffic, city traffic, that the operating range would be normally between 80 to all the way down here, which is about 110 degrees. But with the dual fan system, which was done primarily with the air conditioning rather than the single fan, you get more cooling and you don't have to worry about this. So even at this very high temperature now, what we have out here in the mid-90s today in Kansas, it is hot and humid. I'm staying barely at 80 degrees. That is the temperature I usually see in the winter. And my AC compressor, like I said, is no longer cycling in and out. It goes, and now I have full cold air even at low RPM. I just wanted to throw this in, said that's fixed now too. The only adding I will do to the system is when that shroud comes, because the fan itself actually is attached to the shroud, and then the shroud mounts in these holes, and that will fit into my chassis here. That is all pre-aligned with the bolts I got. Then we can do it. So, but I figured I'm going to put it in now until the shroud gets here. That may be here on Saturday, it may be here next week. It's coming with UPS ground, so it can take a little while. Okay, and tonight we're going to have the theoretical video. It's going to be not very long, but I'm going to look at the manual and I'm going to point a couple of things out. Oh, the other thing is we also fixed our turn signal. This is now the Euro one, since I sent the Fabi one back for $50, and that was working fine. It fits 100% fit, no problems here, and I can now turn the turn signal, and my high beams no longer come on, only if I activate them. And like before, is when I had the lights on like this and I would make a right turn, the high beams would come on. So that's fixed too. We got that fixed. And then the horn is fixed. Everything is working as intended. You have a great afternoon.